We're gluttons for punishment, Jacob. That's really what it is. It's not exclusive to Jets fans. Fantasy football managers know that all too well. All right, everybody, welcome back. As always, I'm your party host, Joe Rivera, and along with me is Big Take Jacob Camenker. And Jacob, another, the injury bug is pervasive around the NFL. We know this. So another week, some more injuries, and fantasy managers are going to have to make some tough decisions. So first and foremost, I want to talk about, not only have the injury bug swept across the NFL, but fumbleitis seems to be a thing as well. And uh, what happened out there in Arizona, Jacob? And let's talk about the running back's little issue with fumbling, coughing up the ball ahead of the goal line.
Yeah, Amari DiMarcado had one of the most mind-numbing mistakes that most fantasy managers who backed him and started him had to have been tearing their hair out about because number one, many thought DiMarcado was going to end up being the starting running back there, and he only handled 3 touches all game. Number two, he almost broke a 72-yard touchdown run and just inexplicably dropped the ball before the goal line. That is the type of thing that will break the will of fantasy managers. And it nearly broke the will of Jonathan Gannon, too. He got fined $100,000 for going after DiMarcado on the sideline. It caused the Cardinals to lose. So, you look at plays like that and you ask yourself, why do I even play fantasy football? And, part of the reason is because it's unpredictable like that. And we try to predict it the best we can, but there are always those crazy fumbles and crazy turnovers and crazy coaching decisions that hurt fantasy managers every single week, man.
It's because we're gluttons for punishment, Jacob. That's really what it is. It's not exclusive to Jets fans. Fantasy football managers know that all too well. So all right, Jacob, but we're here to help fantasy managers win their leagues. So one way to do that is by giving them some sleeper picks. So why don't you run down the first sleeper pick? A curious choice, might I add, for your first sleeper pick on the list.
Yeah, I know this is not a guy you want to trust in fantasy football most weeks, but Bryce Young has a great matchup against the Cowboys this week. Dallas has allowed the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. And look, we saw this last week with Justin Fields. He didn't have a great game. He didn't start very well, but in garbage time, he was able to move the ball down the field, pad his stats a little bit, and become a quality fantasy starter. I think Bryce Young could do something similar. And look, he's averaging 34.8 passing attempts per game. So he's getting the volume against a weak defense that could be enough to catapult him into that top 12 this week. So don't discount him as a high upside streamer if you're looking for someone at that position.
All right, Jacob, let's head out west to the AFC West. And we know Jim Harbaugh likes to run the football, and we've talked about Marion Hampton a little bit, but it's another Chargers running back who makes your sleeper picks for the week.
Yeah, so Marion Hampton is heading to IR with an ankle injury. That's going to open the door for Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal to handle most of the work there. But I think Vidal is a nice little sleeper pick this week because he's more explosive than Haskins. Haskins is about 6'2", 227 pounds, but he doesn't have a great top gear. Vidal does, and he's playing a Miami defense that has allowed a league-high 668 rushing yards to opposing running backs this week. And we just saw what Rico Dowdle did against them. He ran for 206 yards and a touchdown and did damage as a receiving weapon. That's something Haskins isn't really good at, catching the ball. So there's an opportunity for Vidal to kind of take over as the top pass catching back there too. So I think he has more upside than maybe people realize. So if you're in a league where Haskins got scooped up, but Vidal is out there, don't be afraid to pick him up and just say, hey, I'm going to take a flyer, take a chance and see if he can rip off a big run here.
On the other side of that, Jacob, you mentioned the Dolphins. I want to just touch on the Dolphins real quick because they've been a little feisty this season, you would say. I mean, they fought back from Mike Daniel a little bit, but the offense is fantasy managers always look at their offense for the speed and how they utilize their backs. What is the fantasy outlook moving forward for the Dolphins the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I think you're looking at Jalen Waddle, Darren Waller, and Devon Achane as all being high-end starters at their positions because we saw Waddle's first game without Tyreek Hill. He was clearly involved as the number one receiver. Waller, as he's getting more and more snaps, he's becoming more and more productive. So, if you're desperate for help at tight end, which is a fantasy wasteland, and you could somehow get Waller, we're gonna recommend that you do that. And then Achane is really the lead back there. He's catching a lot of passes out of the backfield. He's probably going to stay in that role. Maybe Ollie Gordon will steal a couple of touchdowns for him near the red zone, but it doesn't seem like he's a big threat to, you know, lose that role at any point. So I think those three guys are guys you want to trust. And Tua, in certain matchups, you can look at as a streamer, but he's probably not a guy you want to start every week in fantasy if you can help it.
All right, Jacob. So we go from the Chargers in the AFC West to division rival, and here's a guy whose name, sorry, Chris Collinsworth, whose name that we've heard in the past for his speed, and it seems like he might have found a little bit of a niche with the Chiefs, and that's Tyquan Thornton. Why is he a sleeper pick of yours this week?
Yeah, I think a lot of people expected that when Xavier Worthy came back, Thornton's role in the offense would diminish. It really hasn't. He's seen fewer snaps. I think he's played less than 50% of the offensive snaps in back-to-back weeks, but he's still showing good chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. He had 3 catches for 90 yards in their loss to the Jaguars last week. So that's enough to make him a big-time playmaker and a boomer bust fantasy flex that you want to maybe trust in good matchups. And the Lions defense is surrendering 14.5 yards per reception to wide receivers. That profiles as a good matchup for Thornton because he's averaging a league high 20.9 yards per catch. So it's only going to take 1-2 catches to make him, a viable fantasy option. And if you can get 3 or 4 at that type of clip, you're talking about him being maybe a wide receiver 3. So I think that's a pretty nice option for a guy who's available on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues.
Before we move on to your last sleeper pick, I do want to hit on Patrick Mahomes a little bit here, Jacob. Throws an interception for a pick six to goal line. What's he looking like for fantasy prospects this year?
Yeah, I think he's still a top tier fantasy quarterback. He's had a couple of, head scratching plays like that pick six. So that was more of a good play by Devin Lloyd than anything else. And Kareem Hunt's inability to tackle him was kind of funny to watch. I'll be honest. It was like you see him coming at him and you're like, oh, he's going to get him. And it's like, nope, he is not. But anyway, Mahomes has been tasked with kind of fully carrying that Chiefs offense. Rashee Rice has been out. Xavier Worthy missed time. So a lot has fallen on Mahomes. He's obviously performing pretty well as a passer, but the biggest reason that he's going to continue to be a high-end fantasy option is his rushing ability. Chiefs don't have a really high-end running back right now. Mahomes leads the team in rushing. So unless they get an upgrade before the trade deadline, that's probably going to continue. He's probably going to scramble more than usual. That'll give him a higher floor than some of those other second tier starting quarterbacks. But, I know there's a lot of consternation about, well, this isn't the Patrick Mahomes that threw 50 touchdowns during his first season as a starter, but it's a different league. It's a different way that they're attacking Mahomes. So, he's still going to be a good fantasy asset, but he doesn't have that same ceiling he did in his younger years, probably.
All right, Jacob, we move on to your last sleeper pick here, a guy that I thought we were done with, but apparently not, because the fantasy world loves this guy, and that's Taysom Hill. Saints all utility, super utility guy, or Swiss Army knife, whatever you want to call him, versus the Patriots this weekend. Why is Taysom Hill making your sleeper list?
It's honestly just a swing for the fences type of pick here. He doesn't particularly match up well against the Patriots team that's allowing the 4th fewest rushing yards per game in the NFL, but Hill had 6 carries last week. He threw a pass for 19 yards. They only had him play a handful of snaps as he returns from a torn ACL. But the biggest thing that I heard, there was a report out there that Hill is potentially serving as the team's backup quarterback. So if Spencer Rattler were to get injured, Hill might get all the snaps at quarterback. That would make him an instant fantasy tight end cheat code if he's getting all the quarterback reps. So again, if you're desperate for help at tight end, you can pick up Taysom Hill and just say, hey, let's see if this pans out. Just throw him in there. He has high touchdown upside because he will get red zone carries and he should get more snaps moving forward. And hey, if he gets more opportunities at quarterback and throws for 100 yards at the tight end position, that would be, give him a much higher floor than other guys at that fantasy wasteland position.